All right, let's jump right in. We're going back in time to a quiet monastery garden where one of the greatest mysteries of life was about to be unraveled. And it wasn't cracked with a fancy telescope or in a high-tech lab, but with a bunch of pea plants. So where are we? It's 1856. We're in what's now the Czech Republic. And the mystery we're talking about, it's not some far-off cosmic puzzle. It's something you see every single day, in every family, in every living thing. The question is this: how does it all work? How do you get your mother's eyes or your father's smile? How does life pass down its secrets from one generation to the next? It's one of the most fundamental questions you can ask. And it turns out one man decided he was going to be the one to figure it out. Not a famous professor at a big university, but a monk named Gregor Mendel. And his laboratory? It was the monastery garden. Now, to really appreciate just how brilliant Mendel was, you have to understand what he was up against. What did everyone else think was going on with heredity back then? Well, the going theory was something called the blending theory. And honestly, it sounds kind of logical. The idea was that traits from two parents just blend together, like mixing paint. You mix black paint and white paint, you get gray paint. So a tall parent and a short parent should have a medium-sized kid, right? But Mendel, he had a hunch that nature was a bit more clever than that. He suspected there were hidden, precise rules at work. To find those rules, our detective needed the perfect subject for his experiment. And his choice here was an absolute stroke of genius that really made all the difference. He chose the humble garden pea. Why? Well, for a few very smart reasons. First, they grow super fast, so he could see multiple generations in just a few years. Second, and this is the big one, they have these very clear either-or traits. A pea flower is either purple or it's white. There's no in-between. And third, he could totally control their mating. He could play matchmaker. Now, Mendel actually tracked 7 different traits, but to keep things nice and clear for us, we're going to follow just one, just like he did: plant height. The plants were either tall or they were short. Simple as that. He started with what he called the P generation, P for parent. These were what you call true breeding plants. That just means that if a tall plant self-pollinated, all of its offspring were tall, every single time. And the same for the short ones. They were his pure, predictable starting line. Okay, so the stage is set. And this is where the real investigation begins. He set up his first big experiment, and it was designed to put that old blending theory to the ultimate test. So he asked a really simple question. If you take one of those purebred tall plants and cross it with a purebred short plant, what do you get? Now, according to the blending theory, you should get a whole field of medium-sized plants, shouldn't you? Yeah, well, that is not what happened. Not even close. Get this. Every single one of the offspring, which he called the F1 generation, was tall. Not medium, not kinda tall, just tall. The short trait had completely vanished. Poof, gone. It was like the short parent never even existed.
This was a huge puzzle, and it led him to a really profound idea. He basically said that one of these traits is so powerful it can completely hide or mask the other one.
He actually had to invent a new vocabulary for this. The trait that showed up, tall, he called dominant. And the one that disappeared, short, he called recessive. But that just made the mystery even deeper. Where on earth did the shortness go? But Mendel wasn't done. He knew this story had another chapter, and the second part of his experiment was about to deliver an even bigger shock. He had to know the answer to the next big question. Was that recessive short trait destroyed forever, or was it just hiding? And his method for finding out was beautifully simple. He just took all those tall plants from the F1 generation and let them self-pollinate, just do their natural thing. Then he planted their seeds to create the next generation, the F2s. And as these new plants started to grow, there it was, the ghost in the machine. Short plants started reappearing. Now, Mendel was a seriously meticulous guy, so he didn't just eyeball it. He counted every single plant. He ended up with 787 tall plants and 277 short ones. Now, on the surface, those numbers just look like, well, numbers. But Mendel saw something deeper. He saw a pattern. When he did the math, he found an almost perfect 3-to-1 ratio. For every one short plant, there were about 3 tall ones. This wasn't random chance. This was a rule. This was a code. And that hidden ratio, that 3-to-1, that was the key. It was the clue that allowed him to finally crack the code and come up with a theory that would change biology forever.
He proposed that for every trait, an organism has a pair of invisible instructions. He called them factors, but today we call them genes. And here's the crucial part. Each parent only passes down one of its two factors to its offspring.
So let's see how this explains that 3-to-1 ratio. Remember the F1 plants? They look tall, but they had to be secretly carrying the hidden factor for shortness. Let's use a big T for the dominant tall factor and a little t for the recessive short one. So those F1 plants were TT. When they reproduce, their factors can combine in 4 possible ways. You could get big T and big T, that's a tall plant. You could get big T and little t, also a tall plant because tall is dominant, or little t and big T, still a tall plant. And then, finally, you have one chance of getting little t, and that is your short plant. So you have 3 ways to get a tall plant and only 1 way to get a short one. Boom! There it is, a 3-to-1 ratio explained perfectly by simple probability.
So Mendel had solved it. He'd figured out one of the most fundamental rules of life. But making a discovery is one thing, getting the world to actually pay attention, that's a whole other story. And for Mendel, this is where things get a little tragic.
He published all his groundbreaking work in 1866, and the response from the scientific community was pretty much silence. Crickets. They just didn't get it. Gregor Mendel died in 1884, with his incredible discovery completely unrecognized. It wasn't until the year 1900 that his paper was rediscovered by other scientists, finally kicking off the entire field we now call genetics.
It's an incredible story when you think about it. It's such a powerful reminder that revolutionary ideas can come from the most unexpected places. And it kind of leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? If one of the deepest secrets of biology was unlocked with something as simple as a pea plant, what other incredible discoveries are just sitting there right in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look?